Coaches, today before we get started, I want to thank our sponsor, CoachPad. No matter if you draw scout cards by hand or use a program on your computer, CoachPad will give you back time by never stuffing a binder again before heading out to practice. First 13.3-inch electronic device allowing coaches to clearly display scout cards outdoors in the sun has been a game changer for programs this past fall and those currently planning all across the country. This new technology allows coaches to coach and not the monotonous task of stuffing and dealing with binders on the practice field. Check out the CoachPad and CoachPad Mini on thecoachpad.com. Please make sure you check out our sponsors, our affiliates, and here is another episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast. Welcome back to another episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast. Today we have Coach Bryan Stinespring with us. Coach is a longtime college assistant. Coach, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Appreciate it. Appreciate you having me on.
No problem, Coach. I almost reached out to you last spring, but I ran out of time, and I think it just timing didn't work out for me to reach out to you. So I figured I'd reach out to you this off season because the sad thing is I'm old enough to remember when you were the offensive coordinator back at Virginia Tech and your time there. But before we kind of get into some of that stuff, I mean, you kind of want, I mean, you're technically a free agent coach right now, but you want to kind of go over.
Yeah, I'm in the coaching portal right now. I decided to enter into the coaching portal.
Do you want to kind of go how you ended up? I mean, through your career, kind of where you are, because like I said, you spent a long time at Virginia Tech and kind of hit a couple different places since then.
Well, born and raised in the state of Virginia, I went to James Madison University. Quick story, which is an hour and 15 minutes from where I was born and raised. A small town, about 5,000 people. And I went an hour and 15 minutes away to James Madison. As soon as I graduated, I started coaching high school ball in Lexington, Virginia, which is about 30 minutes away from where I was born and raised. I did that for a few years. We were fortunate to win a state championship. I went to Roanoke, which again is about 40 minutes away from where I was born and raised. Stayed there for a year and really wanted to see if a college opportunity presented itself. And therefore, also being a teacher, I felt like I needed a master's degree, which I didn't have. So I started exploring routes for a graduate assistantship. Billy Hyde at Virginia Tech called me. I'd been going to Virginia Tech a lot for clinics and camps, and I was familiar with the Virginia Tech staff. So they called and offered me a GA spot. I went. It was at the very, very like the second year of Coach Beamer's stint at our career at Virginia Tech, and he got off to a pretty difficult start, and it didn't change as I became a graduate assistant. And he made a few changes one year, and I was fortunate to be in the right spot at the right time. And I was hired in January of 1993. And that year in 1993, we went 9-3 and made it to the Independence Bowl, and was able to win the Independence Bowl. And I started a streak of 23 straight bowls while we were at Virginia Tech. I was there 25 years, but 23 as a full-time coach. So we really got into a really great run there. I started off as a tight ends and assistant offensive line coach. About 5 years later, I became the line coach. The next year, I became the assistant head coach and line coach. 2001 or 2, I was the line coach and the offensive coordinator to about 2014, and then I was back to the tight ends, assistant offensive line coach for the following 2. I also had a recruiting coordinator tagged to me there a couple different times during that career. So it was a great run. It really was a great run. And one of the things that I think I'd like to share 2 quick things with you. My last contract at Patrick Henry High School, this is kind of where the game has changed a little bit. I think some people back then, I think we got into it. I know coaches got into it for the love of the game, and coaches still do. but we all see the numbers of coaches that are what they're getting paid. Everything's public knowledge. Everything is easy access. But the most ironic thing to me is when I explain it to younger coaches around me, when I left Patrick Henry High School in Roanoke coaching 2 sports, football and wrestling, and my teaching salary, my final contract was going to be $33,000. In 1993, I was hired at Virginia Tech to be the tight ends and assistant offensive line coach at Virginia Tech. Okay, this is 1993. It wasn't 1943. It was 1993. My contract was $33,000.
Yep.
So, a lot has changed since then, but I think it's amazing how the game has progressed that way. But I always tell people, I said, I went away, got a master's degree, made it to major college football, was going to make the same salary that I made there. And then I think as a testament to believing in your hires, Coach Beamer, a lot of people have said this, not sure that he would have survived a 4-year losing record in an institution at this time and age. But Dave Brain, the AD, I give him a lot of credit. A guy that had a great football background. He believed in Frank Beamer, and from '93, we got a winning record. Again, proceeded to 23 straight bowls, about 8 conference championships. Went to the Sugar in '95, Orange in '96, national championship game '99. So that when Coach Beamer retired, I didn't realize that I was going to be retired along with him from Virginia Tech, but that's a part of the game. And I went back. I was afforded the opportunity to go back to my alma mater as the offensive line coach and running game coordinator. And we had 2 great years there with Mike Houston. We won the national championship our first year. We got beat in the national championship game. The following year, we lost 2 games. We lost to North Carolina our first season, and we lost in the national championship game our second season. From there, I went to Maryland. After Maryland, I went to ODU, and then at Delaware.
Okay. Now, a couple things there, and first thing I'll hit on is, and it's one thing I like when you do research on you. I think one of the things that people I don't, this is probably bad wording, but you get extremely high remarks on is your ability to recruit and ability to build relationships with kids. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? Because across the board, you look you up and look up information. It talks about how great of a recruiter you were and how much the kids truly enjoy being around you and kind of your ability to develop relationships with them.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. And I think, one of the things I attribute that to is my parents. My mother worked in a nursing home, and that's a people-oriented business. There's a wide demographics of people that she had to associate herself with. My father was a postal carrier, and that's when you actually went door to door. And I just watched his interaction and my mother's interaction with people. And I think I followed suit with that. I consider myself, people say you're a people person. I believe that. I love people. Being in a high school and a wide array of demographics of being a high school teacher makes you aware of different backgrounds. And And then when I got to Virginia Tech, I was always seeking advice. And I remember Tommy Groom was the tight end coach. And when I got hired, as a tight end coach, he called me in. He was leaving, and he called me in and he said, "Bryan, Steiny, I'm gonna pass on some information to you. You're gonna be a great coach. You're gonna do well in this business. But if you're gonna be the tight ends coach, you better be really good in recruiting, really good in special teams." And I took the recruiting part to heart. It was something that really just fit into my personality. And it's something I really loved. Coach Beamer said on our very first meeting that I wasn't in as a full-time coach. I heard it as a graduate assistant, but I really heard it as a full-time coach. Recruiting is the lifeblood of the program. And I say that to this very day. And I believe that to this very day. And I still love that. I enjoy building the relationships. I enjoy being able to get out and meet different young men, student athletes. But also I understand the significance of it. And I think I worked really hard at it. In building relationships, it's not just with the individual or the family. You got to buy into the community of the school, the community of the areas that you're recruiting, and know that background, know the ins and outs. It's not just going in and seeing the high school coach, going to the guidance counselor, visiting with the kid, going to see the parents when rules allow. I think it's more to it. It's all inclusive, and like anything else, any relationship that you dive deeper into, I think is the betterment of any relationship, professionally and personally.
Now the other thing is you mentioned kind of your spots at JMU and Virginia Tech. Now, when you were was Bob Trott at JMU with you when you were at? Okay,
Absolutely, he was.
I
Absolutely,
I know
absolutely.
I know Coach. Actually, I've had Coach Trott and Coach Foster on here. Ironically,
I have been blessed. I've been around some terrific defensive coordinators. Bud Foster, wow, as an offensive coordinator with Bud as the defensive coordinator, and our special teams, we had a formula that worked exceptionally well. We took all three phases and we played the game as three phases as one. And you can say, okay, it's 3rd and 12. Can we drop back? Is there a chance for all-out blitz and maybe a sack, maybe an interception strip, or do we run a screen, or do we run a draw? You could do that because we knew we were going to be able to punt the ball well, we're going to cover well, and Bud's going to defend well. Conversely, if we needed to be able to push the ball, we could do that. But we played as a great organization, a team, as coaches as a team. But I've been so blessed to be around some terrific defense. Bud Foster's fantastic. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was on the phone with him for a long period of time today. And what I don't think really people really appreciate is his adaptation to the game. The way he adapted, the way he constantly tweaked his defense to fit the game, to how the offenses have changed, but he still never lost sight that the defense was going to dictate the way the game was played either. Yeah. And then Bob Trott, different style, different temperament, but wow, his game preparation, fantastic. They made your springs difficult. They made spring balls difficult. I always have a little angst on both of them. You know what I mean?
That's what I was going to ask you. Is like as an offensive coach, like when you're going up against two coaches with the experience and the preparation and the overall aura is probably a bad word, but aura. Like, what does that kind of make your weekly practice, especially in the spring when you're really going against your stuff? What is that like to have that level of quality on the opposite side, especially when you're working with, let's just be honest, you're an offensive line or tight ends coach and you're trying to block all that crap they're sending at you. What does that kind of from a practice standpoint look like for you?
Well, when you're the coordinator and offensive line coach and going against those guys in spring practice, I think it's invaluable. I think you asked some great questions. It's invaluable because you better be ready. You better treat every practice like you get ready to go into a game. Because if you're not ready, if your offensive staff's not ready for that Wednesday practice, that Saturday scrimmage, therefore, your players aren't going to be ready. And if they're not ready, if you haven't prepped them as if it's a game situation, if it's a game temperament out there, you're going to get exposed. And so I think it made us all better coaches. I think our players had to be constantly ready for evolving practice. Coach Beamer was not going to slow us down and say, okay, I remember Ralph Friesen coming to practice one time. It was like the 4th day of spring practice. Bud's over there, 8-man front, right before he snapped the ball. They're in bear defense. They're stemming out of it. And I said, Coach Friesen, he's just standing back there. And they're blitzing off of it. They're twisting off of it. And all this. And like I said, it's the 4th day of spring practice. And Coach wasn't going to say, it's our job to catch up. It's the defense's job to that's how they're going to play. So he's not slowing them down. So it's our job. So I went up to Coach Friesen. I said, Coach Friesen, what do you think? He said, I can't help you. Right? He said, this is a lot. He said, I need to go talk to Frankie. And then, but I just think it made you a more disciplined coach, understanding what prepared means. Your drills, when you go out there and run drills, and the first tidbit I'd give you is whatever drills you're running in the spring to get ready for Bud, you better be running those drills to prep for what's getting ready to happen in period 10, 11, and 12, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I would share with you, and this is something I'd share with any coach. Offensive coaches like meeting with offensive coaches. I can't tell you the number of coordinators, offensive coordinators I've talked to, or, we all go out in this professional development. We go visit other schools. Other schools come in, you study other tape. That's part of the framework of what you're doing. How do you make yourself better on offense, Bud, the defense, with the different places, or had different schools come in? But when you have somebody like a Bud Foster, a Bob Trott, speak to defensive coaches. If we do this, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
If we show this set, what are you thinking? You will learn more talking to defensive coaches that really are going to tell you a lot more about your offense or how they're defending you than talking, we're going to attack the defense this way. We're going to do this to this front. But how are they going to defend you?
Yeah.
Invaluable to have that. Bud and I would get together. He said, we're going to do this. How are you going to try to block that? Conversely, I'd say, Bud, they're going to play a little bear. We're thinking about doing this. He said, well, that's good, but here's going to be their first adjustment. So you just got, it's just so many, there's so many dynamics to it, but it made me a better coach in the spring. It made all of us better coaches. You came out of spring, you hope your football team gets better. But I think as you just continue that competitive mode, we're all working together and to have that relationship. We checked our egos at the door. And you got to be willing to do that. We're not trying to beat the defense. The defense is not trying to out-scheme us. We're just working together. So at the end of the day, not only our football players get better in the spring, but I think our staff's got to get better as we get with through springs and got ready to prep for the fall.
Yeah. No, perfect, Coach. I mean, like I said, I've had a chance to talk to both of them. And I think both of them are absolutely fantastic.
Fantastic.
They're also just great human beings. But kind of continuing to build off that is, we mentioned a little bit there, tight end and O-line play, and from a preparation standpoint for practice, because you've kind of gone back and forth between tight ends and offensive line over the course of your career, whether you be tight ends coach to start, then move to O-line, then move back to tight ends, and kind of do both. What is there a different level of preparation or how you prepare for coaching tight ends compared to coaching O-line and vice versa?
Well, I think the biggest difference is more often than not, I think the biggest difference is just simplistically is that you're worried about the Y position when you're coaching the tight end. Now it's kind of all, now you have a Y, whether you call it the H or the U or whatever, you got two tight ends on the field. But at the end of the day, those parts are interchangeable. I think the preparation to be an offensive line coach is probably the most demanding of all the spots. You got 5 guys, and each of them may have a different technique, a different responsibility. You talk about a run game, how many schemes do you have in the run game? Protections, is it play action? Is it sprint draw? Is it sprint out? Is it 6-man protection? Is it 5-man protection? And you got to have 5 guys, not only knowing their job, but you got to develop a cohesiveness within that group where they all flow together, where the center and the left guard, the right left guard, the left tackle, and a combination of all 3, they have to be able to work in unison. And now, how do you prepare an individual to work as a group? You got to get them individually better, but at the end of the day, that group has got to be a cohesive group that plays as one. And I think that takes I don't think you could go. I know it practices at 3:30. You over there thinking about your game, your practice plan at 3, you're in trouble. I think you got to have a plan every day, not just the logistics of what's going in offensively and individually, what the center does, what the right guard does, or what the right whatever, but also the tight end. And you got to be able to have it broken up where you get individual work in, but always bringing the group in together and working as a group. And probably one of the best things that I found out in terms of my preparation is you'll find out quickly how well the group works together. Is everybody can block the base front, but then I've learned over the years as an offensive line coach, you got to move them, and you got to move the defense. You got to show them the blitz looks in the run game, because now people are changing gaps and moving, and if the center and the guard can pass something off, if the tackle and the guard can pass something, those are the things that have been most beneficial. Testing the ability of the line to work together.
Okay, no, that's perfect. Now, kind of you mentioned that right there, and there's a couple other points I'll hit on before we get to kind of where you guys ended up scheme wise. You want to talk a little about how you guys evolved as an offense at Virginia Tech? I mean, because we talked a little bit about that off screen, but I mean, you guys, I'd argue there's a pretty big offensive evolution from a ISO toss sweep team to where you guys finished up as a zone and counter team. And obviously football evolved over the course of that, and you guys had some really good athletes come in there, especially in the late 90s, early 2000s, to kind of help transform college football. Do you want to talk a little bit kind of how y'all's, especially yours as offense coordinator, your philosophy evolved over the time?
Well, when we first, the early years, whatever the early years are, probably from Coach Beamer's start, probably till 95, probably, that 5-year period, straight isolation, power, toss sweep, counter. Again, as you and I spoke earlier, Coach Beamer having a defensive background, you had to have a counter in. Okay. When I was the offensive coordinator, I always made sure I scripted a counter and a counter pass. And if I didn't get to it, I heard about it the next day, whether we won by 40 or whatever it was, I still heard about it. So we were really big on that part of it. We weren't a zone team at that time at all. It was power, counter, which are gap schemes in theory, and then toss sweep, man scheme, and block down, pull, and get the ball outside. That was primarily how we were going to run the ball. As I give credit where credit's due, is Ricky Bussell was our offensive coordinator in 93. Okay. He left in 94 to go to South Carolina with Brad Scott, who had just left the Florida State spread offense, four wides, Charlie Ward, the whole deal. And I think Ricky was kind of enamored with some of the zone schemes that they had. And we always dabbled in it, but never featured it. And I think we made more of a conscientious effort to become a better zone team. And we actually started off with what we continued to run was a mid zone. And just for everybody's knowledge, how you label a zone, you say we're a zone team, but it's more than that. It's an inside zone or inside or tight. There's a mid, there's a wide, and there's also an outside. And everything is about landmarks. And I'm talking about the tailback's landmarks, his first key read, the line's landmarks on who they're blocking and how they're setting up the tracks. The tracks of the tailback, the tracks of the line need to marry one another. And so we really became a mid-zone team and got really good at it. And then we started to spread the field more. As our receiving core grew, as our speed grew, we wanted to be able to spread the field as well. And we did that, but we became, as years went on, probably with Michael Vick, we became a really, we dabbled in some option early, but Danny Pearman and I went to Nebraska at the end of the 98 season and spent 2 springs, a couple days, 2 springs in Nebraska and got a lot of their speed option, which wasn't a featured play, but with Michael, became something we could throw out there and teams had to defend. And we did that. We did it from big boy sets. We did it from spread sets. But we became a little bit more of a spread team as it moved forward. As we moved into the ACC play, we really became a big zone, but we never got away from the power either or the counter. I still believe in this game. There's most of the power game you see now is out of the gun and the power read by the quarterback or the wildcat, but there's still a place in my heart to be able to line up and get some double teams and be able to run the ball downhill.
We'll come back to Michael Vick later because I do have one question on him towards the end. But you mentioned kind of the differences between like a casual fan will pretty much know there's an inside and outside zone. I think that's kind of where that's. Yeah, that's the casual person. You know, when you're talking coaches, you hear the term inside, mid, tight, wide, outside. Do you, especially for younger coaches on my audience, do you want to kind of go a little bit more in detail, kind of some of the differences between those five? I mean, obviously you guys were a mid to tight team more than anything, but kind of the differences, at least for you guys, and what you kind of hit on the most.
Well, again, I think everything is determined when you go inside or tight /tight. Depending on who you are, you give the tailback his initial landmark, and it may be the play side butt cheek of the center. That's tight. So if you're a left guard and you're running that zone to the left, you're not trying to overreach a defensive tackle on my outside shoulder. I'm going to inside out it because that tailback is taking a gap. The tight alignment, his tight track. So we're going to tight track our approach to a defensive player. So if I'm a left guard and we're running a tight zone and I got a defensive player on my shoulder anywhere outside of me, I'm not trying to reaching where he beats me inside. I want to try to quick step him and be more inside out based upon his alignment. Then the center is going to be more patient on his climb to the linebacker level because of the tailback, there's a potential to keep it front side, but even a bigger potential for it to go backside. So linebackers are going to hold, and then they're going to try to fit the tailback. So it's a slower reaction to get to the next level. That's probably the biggest key is what is the tailback's initial aiming point, and then the line's initial tracks are going to marry that according to who they're blocking. The wide of the zone, a mid, for example, a mid, if I'm a left guard and I got a defensive tackle on my outside shoulder. Now the aiming points for us was anywhere from the middle of the cheeks of the left tackle to the inside leg. And so now his track is now wider. And now he's reading the first down guy to that side, but his initial track is going to start that way. Now you get more flow from the linebacker. But now as a guard, I'm going to my initial landmark or the track that I'm going to set, my first step is going to set that track to marry with the tailback is more play side number area. And that doesn't mean I have to get to it, but I'm going to try. And if I capture it, then that ball better stay outside of it. But if I don't capture it, then that defensive tackle has to move with me. And now that affords the tailback, because a lot of people say a cutback, but even if he does, it's not really a cutback. We've stretched to 3 and he jump cuts to 3. And then the wider the zone is, now if I go to a wider zone, if I'm a left guard with the same technique on him, now I'm trying to get my helmet on my initial step through his shoulder pad, play side armpit. Okay. And I'm trying to get my second step through his crotch. And then the tailback, his landmark is anywhere from the inside to outside or 2 yards out, yard outside, depending on if it's a wide or a stretch play. And you hear a lot of line coaches, the biggest arguments that happen on the field or in the meeting room is between the running back and the line coach. Because depending on the zone, in the tempo that the tailback has to know with these, tempo is something that very people talk about, but the tempo of the tailback and the line, not just their tracks, but the tempo has to match. And all of a sudden, if we're going in a certain direction and we think we should be staying on track to block the linebacker, and the tailback cuts back or jumps up inside, or however you want to jump cuts, whatever the term is, and the linebacker falls back inside, well, there's going to be an argument that Sunday between the O-line coach and the tailback coach on he's got to press the hole longer before he makes that decision. That may be one of the most difficult things about us. I don't think, and of course, in my opinion, to be able to run a tight, a mid, and an outside, that's all good. It's a zone play to the line. We change our technique, but to get it married up with the tailback or the second team tailback, that's difficult. I just think they have three. To us, we were going to be a mid zone. That was our feature, and then we moved to a wider zone. Been with teams that preferred the tight zone and then move straight to the outside zone. But to be able to have all three, that's so now you really see teams that are really the inside zone. However, now again, it doesn't have to be the butt cheek of the center. It could be the inside leg, whatever you guys feel the most comfortable with. Everybody has their opinion. But I think most teams now have really kind of centered themselves around, we're going to be an inside zone, because the more you spread the field, the wider you place the ball, and nobody can protect the edge because you're spread out, and you're trying to protect defensive ends coming underneath you or defensive tackles coming underneath you because it's an inside zone. The more you spread it, the inside zone has gained flavor over the years.
Okay. Now, to kind of continue on that, we also mentioned counter earlier. What would you classify as like your key coaching points for counter? When you're talking, I mean, and it could be backfield or, I mean, tight end, O-line, tight ends. I mean, you've done this long enough and you've been a coordinator at major college football. So is there any particular coaching point, especially, I mean, because like, I'll say this, like in the state of Ohio, like our state is primarily I would say majority of our state is a gap scheme oriented.
Right. I'm familiar with Ohio.
Yeah. A lot of power, a lot of counter. Wide zones getting a lot of prevalence. Inside zone is really like the big schools that have a lot of athletic linemen, all that jazz. It's inside zone's not a big thing, at least yet. What would you classify, especially for Ohio coaches listening, like key coaching points in the counter play?
Okay. Cool. You said two. Yeah, I think.
I mean, you can go as depth as you want, Coach.
Okay.
Go as depth as you want.
The most simplistic thing first, and this is just because you better check it. And I was around Charlie Wiles, who was a defensive line coach at Virginia Tech. Now he's at NC State. And I think Charlie Wiles is fantastic. But he's not just putting his defense in, he's studying your offensive line as I'm studying defensive line. And all of a sudden, the first thing I'm going to tell you is your guards better not give away the pull. Okay. And you better be prepared. You better study your guards in their alignment, because guards that have to pull, they want to get out of their stance. They want to back off the ball. And defensive linemen, if they do those things enough, change your stance, lighten your hand, defensive linemen are going to read it. And either they're going to try to penetrate, defeat the back block on him, or they're going to run around, or try to get back across the back block and get into play. So the most simplistic thing is make sure you're not giving the counter the pulls away. The second thing is you have to give the first puller and the second puller a wide array of looks. So is a guard kicking out the defensive end? Is the guard going to pin the defensive end? And how's the second puller fitting? Because if they don't get good at it, you're going to have the H-back or whoever the second puller is. The guard's going to late log, and the tight end's going to think he's up underneath or he's trying to kick him out. And all of a sudden you got two guys blocking the same guy. That I think you have to get really good at, because defenses are going to try to disguise what they're doing. They're not always going to say, oh, they're going to stand there squared, you're going to kick him out in the H-back, or the second puller's up underneath. They're going to disguise. They're going to stay square. As soon as they feel the guard, they go duck underneath. Now the kick out turns into log, and the second puller's got to see that. So I think you got to get the first puller and second puller a lot of looks, and that tailback's got to be in there with them and see it. and trust the block. The second puller's got to trust the first block, and the tailback's got to trust the second puller and follow it. The third thing I would say is everybody gets caught up on getting to the linebacker, the backside linebacker. Control the down guy first. Would you like to get two hats on him and disrupt his life, pancake him, stand over, do a happy dance, all those things? Absolutely. But that's hard anymore, especially in major college football or football I've been around. They're pretty good at that defensive tackle. They're not going to get moved. And three techniques are outside shoulder techniques. Three techniques, when they move, they become two techniques, or two techniques are inside shoulder guards. They loop out. Those double teams have got to control the look of the defensive lineman they're responsible for, and they cannot allow that guy to disrupt the count. When I run gaps in the past, and even to this day, when I put a gap scheme in, I do not put a linebacker in there in the first day, maybe 2 days. Because when you do that, you're not giving, if the three technique pinches inside, the inside shoulder guy pinches back outside, or he just tries to get big on you. They're so caught up on the backside linebacker that the first level's not taken care of. So 0.3 may be the most important of the things that I would share with you. Okay. But the most important to me is you got to control the down guy. Does that mean you'd like to knock him back 5 yards, take him back to? Absolutely. But all of a sudden, there's going to be so many times that the guard's coming off of the linebacker at about the same time the tackle is. Or neither one of them come off. And that is the central biggest part of the game that has to be worked. So when you go, I'm a zone team to a gap scheme, well, that's great. But are you getting the same, what I told you earlier about, I test my O-line's awareness of working together as a group about their ability to handle all the movements, not the base defense. If they can't block the base defense, or at least get into the position to do that and handle that, then we're going to have a problem on Saturday. Okay. Regardless, we're going to have a problem. But can they handle the other things? But you get to the gap scheme, yeah. Oh, we got the rule. We can block this. We got it. We know who we got. But can you handle the central idea is that the point of attack has to be controlled. And in any gap scheme, you said counter. That could be the power. I think you got to coach that into them till it's just, if we don't get the backside because we're beating up the three technique or whoever, because it's Dominic Sue in there. Okay, you don't take care of Dominic Sue, it don't matter what you do to the backside linebacker. It makes no difference. So, and that's just one guy.
Yeah. But
he left an indelible impression on me. Let me just say that. So, but I think that's big. And the fourth thing I would say is you better work that backside tackle and center on that. The center's typically the one that's got to block back. Somebody's pulling. It's normally the backside guard on the power and the counter, but you better work that. And you better, when that center goes back, he better be good enough to handle a penetrator, and he better be in depth enough to be able to handle a guy that tries to beat him back across his face. It's a block that I don't think we work hard enough on. Okay, that may be one of those blocks that kind of you hit it a little bit, but at the end of the day, sometimes you get what you earn. And if you don't, and then the last part that goes along with that, it's all about handling the back block. Your tackle, who's what's called a gap seal hinge, he's got to help on the gap inside, especially if it's a three technique. He's got to help that center who's going to block all the way back on the guy in the B gap. That tackle has got to be able to keep a body presence in that B gap to help the center, and then be able to hinge back out for the defensive end and maybe coming off the edge as well. That block can be a great asset to the center, but how you coach that tackle is critical. You can't let him step into the line because the defensive end is going to beat him around the edges. He steps into the line and tries to get back out for the defensive end. It's not going to happen, especially if that defensive end is going to come ripping off the edge. So you got to get them to step flat or even lose a little ground so they're keeping more of a body presence into the big gap area. And I've always told my tackles, as you gap, you don't need to look at the three technique. You don't need to look at that gap. If you use right footwork and keep a body presence, you're going to bail out when that end becomes a threat. So I think that has helped us a lot. And then a lot of teams, in one of the variations that have occurred over the years, is sometimes the center becomes a puller as opposed to the guard. Because if he's got to chase back on a three technique, let's let the pulling right guard block the three and pull the center. That's all good. I think it's a great change up. But I think sometimes the timing, especially on a counter, gets out of whack when you do it. That's how you got to do it.
Yeah. No, that's perfect, Coach. Now, one of my last two questions for you is, I mean, obviously, like your off season and our high school off season are vastly different, especially up north here. Unfortunately, we don't have true spring ball yet. But you guys are at least able to work with your kids to a point without a ball for kind of strength and conditioning stuff you guys do. And then obviously you guys get spring ball. We get obviously strength and conditioning, but we don't get like true spring ball where we get 7-mans where we're allowed to pull 7 kids at a time and do stuff. Is there anything you'd recommend, especially high school offensive line coaches, on stuff to work on during those 7-mans, on how maybe stuff for the extra stuff for their kids to do in the weight room for offensive line, any offensive development ideas for high school coaches for the off season?
Oh, the easiest answer is work on their footwork. Well, no kidding, Coach. We're all going to work. But I do think the linemen are creatures of habit, and you got to be able to create the habit. And the only way to do it is repetition. And those are the best times to do that because you can explain the why you want them to step that way, why the knee inside the ankle is important, the tilt of the toe, whatever it may be. I think those things are critical. I do think the footwork, and it gets back to what you're running and how many things you're running. But to be able to slow it down for them and just work their footwork is critical. But these are the times for little things to really be addressed. Hand placement. Everybody wants to talk about footwork, and where do my hands go, Coach? Where am I putting my hands? Where do I want to get my helmet to? Well, those are the things. And then the third thing is, how do you get them to develop some pop? And so those are the times where I think you can sit there and say, okay, I'm going to break this down into footwork, hands, and then I want to get their hips involved. I mean, you do all this squatting, you do all these hand cleans, and then you watch guys block and they never get their hips involved. So those are the things I think you try to move forward with the group doing that. And then quite honestly, if I have a team that's going to throw the ball in high school, no, you got teams that are going to sprint it out and they're going to toss it over the yard. Nobody grew up backpedaling and pass protecting. All of us played toss up and tackle in the backyard, and none of us nobody played right guard.
Yeah.
Nobody played right. The only guy was the center who snapped it sideways and waited for the 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3. Okay, so pass protection to me, if we're going to throw the ball, then I want to have a group that are knowledgeable enough to give them a foundation on how to protect. Because I think that's the hardest thing. Because I coached high school ball. When do you work on pass protection other than the who?
Yeah. I mean,
and those are the times I think if you're going to throw the ball and you got a pretty good quarterback, well, that's fine if I'm pass rushing you because I'm not getting there. Okay, I'm a magnet. I'm gonna get on you. I'm stuck. But you're going to run into some guys coming off that edge that can run, and your tackles. You see it in college ball. You see it in college ball to this day. You see it in the NFL. I mean, Tampa Bay's got great players, but you see quarterbacks getting hit, and once they get hit, guess the defensive end is jacked up. I can get home, and once you give them the ability, the belief that they can get home, here comes pain.
Yeah.
So you want to give them a chance. So if you're going to throw the ball, that's the time where I think you can slow it down, because, like I said, game week, picking up blitzes, picking up twists, picking up this, run game, pick up twists, pick up blitzes. How? What's my set? What's the spot I'm trying to get to if I'm a left tackle and I got a guy out there lined up at the bottom of the number somewhere? It looks like he's blitzing from the parking lot C. How do I set that guy? So to give him a chance, that'd be my advice.
Yeah. And then last question for you. We mentioned Michael Vick earlier in the podcast, and I was always curious for somebody who was with him at Virginia Tech is what that experience was like, because I have vivid memories of one of my first Bengal games I ever went to, and they were playing the Atlanta Falcons, and I watched Michael Vick pretty much run up and down the field and only throw to Algie Crumpler the entire game, because that's pretty much the only guy that the Bengals couldn't cover, or most teams couldn't cover, if we're going to be honest. But before that, I mean, you had him really in the beginning of the change of college football when colleges were going to more of a true spread offense. What was that experience like, just being able to use that kind of athlete in practice and in games, and how that changed stuff for you as a coaching staff?
It'd been a lot easier for us if Rich Rodriguez would have developed and I'm not giving Coach Rodriguez, but they were close enough to us. If he'd have developed the old quarterback decide play just a tad earlier, okay, we'd have had a real easy couple road. We didn't have that yet.
Yeah,
we didn't have quarterback counters. We were still predominantly a lot of two back. We did incorporate the speed option. The only true runs that we had with Michael was drop back. If they're not there, go. And then the speed option. And we would have a quarterback draw built in. But could you imagine college ball if we had to decide the quarterback decide play, the quarterback counters, the quarterback power scheme that's in right now?
Yeah.
And we guys that were there at that time, we talk about this the whole time. But we had enough with Michael. He, like I said, if he dropped back and it wasn't there, the play wasn't over. The play may just beginning. And we ran enough draws with him. But that's probably one thing you think back upon and say, God, I wish we'd have done this, wish we'd done that. But if we'd have done that, I don't know if anybody would have really seen a true measure of his ability to throw the ball.
Yeah.
Whether it was deep, whatever, you saw some spectacular throws, and he can make spectacular throws. I actually was watching a clip earlier today on Twitter. I think somebody posted something about our game against Boston College in '99, and just some of the darts he threw. A wheel route, kind of rolled out and threw a wheel route down, and just dropped it on. But then they threw a 70-yard post route to Andre Davis on a rope. And you just forget that. I'll say this about Michael Vick. Probably the thing that sticks out in my mind the most, you guys got a chance to see a lot of things on Saturdays. You have no idea what we saw on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. I mean, Coach Beamer would come up to after a play. He'd go, "What did he do?" I said, well, we'll have to go back. You had to go back and wait till we get in and watch practice to see exactly how he did that. And phenomenal. And he loved practice. But I think the first time we knew something, this is going to be an extraordinary experience here, is I think we're getting ready to play Syracuse. And if you know that time, Donovan McNabb, I can't remember who was before him. It was whoever was before him. But they had, a two-tier quarterback who could throw it and run it, whether it was McPherson or I can't remember who it was. But Michael's going to be really big that week going against Syracuse. That Michael gave them a good look because they were running the option. They were running speed options and some trap options and running the quarterback here and there and just his skill level and his ability to throw the ball. So we're in a staff meeting on Wednesday morning. We'd already had our Tuesday practice. And Coach Beamer, as always, he says, Coach Bustle or me, if I was a coordinator, how do you think prep's going? How do you think prep's going? How do you think you practice? How do you think the plan looked yesterday? What are you going to do to get better today? He looked at Bud. He said, hey, Bud, how's the game prep going? And Bud didn't mince words. He looked up and said, Coach, we either are the worst frapping tackling team in America, and they're going to rush for 500 yards, or this Vick kid is special. Well, the kid was special.
Yeah. That's a fact, Coach.
They're either going to rush for 500 yards. We can't tackle. We're the worst tackling team in America, or the Vick kid is special.
That's great. No, that's a perfect, Coach. I think that's a good way to end it. Coaches, thank you for listening. Check out sponsors, affiliates. There's a spot that you want to go back and listen to, whether it be our conversation about Coach Foster and Coach Trott, offensive line, his offensive evolution, zone, counter, beginning of the Michael Vick story, etc. If there's any part that you want to go back to, all the tags will be in the bio. They might be slightly off if they're on Anchor or Spotify, but on YouTube, they're good to go. And then that was another episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast.